Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Moving into our first breaking news today, we were able to hear that at the airfield of Daznkhoi, apparently a large ATACMS hit has started to hit targets within the region, and not only that, have also hit the Daznkhoi airbase with 12 ATACMS missiles right outside the area of Simferopol. This is a major attack, considering that at the moment the Ukrainians have just received ATACMS missiles nearly several days ago, and we now understand that they're starting to use ATACMS missiles en masse to attack Russian targets deep behind the lines in areas such as Crimea. Not only that, but the farthest range attacks were nearly 200 kilometers away, meaning that these are the long-range ATACMS that were to be provided with the brand new military drawdown of $6 billion that was announced around a week ago. From what we understand, the Ukrainians are attempting to use these missiles to knock out Russian air bases and therefore severely decrease the amount of available Russian air power that would be able to be used in the war in Ukraine, either in an air-to-air role or an air-to-ground role. This is extremely beneficial for the Ukrainian armed forces, as currently Russian air forces have been getting a larger swath of the battlefield, or a larger amount of action around battlefield zones, due to a decreased amount of air defense activity due to a shortage of ammunition for vital Ukrainian air defense systems. This means that the Ukrainians being able to attack these airfields and either knock out the surface-to-air missile systems at them or the aircrafts that are along the tarmac means that they will have a much greater chance of decreasing Russian air activities and therefore decreasing Russian battlefield effectiveness along different areas of the front lines. We were also able to get an additional report that they had conducted the massive attack on Crimea, and apparently 4 different locations were hit. According to the information that we were able to receive from Nexta, it is reported about the strikes on the military units in the village of Daznkhoi in the Simferopol district and on the facilities of the 31st Air Defense Division of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation in the Chernomorsky and Satsky districts. It is also claimed that the ballistic missiles again attacked the Daznkhoi airfield, the location of the helicopter regiment of the 4th Air Force and Air Defense Command of the Southern Military District. Overall, the combination of all of these attacks over the area of Crimea and their hopeful successful destruction of Russian targets will mean that Russian forces will most likely be dealing with less air power assets here in the near future, and that also means that they'll be having decreased battlefield efficiency, especially in areas like the Zaporizhia front near to Robotny, and also inside the Dnipro reservoir areas, where there is currently a large amount of fighting going on in both directions. At the exact same time that this news came out today of the major attacks that the Ukrainians have conducted on Russian air and air power assets within the area of Crimea, we've also been able to hear that a immediate counterattack that the Russians had tried to conduct onto the island in the middle of the Dnipro reservoir, Nestria, was repelled today as they attempted 2 times to try and storm the island, and both times were repelled with heavy losses, according to the statements by the Operational Command South spokesperson Dmytro Pletenchuk. This appears to be showing once again that the Ukrainians are doing an incredibly good job at conducting the defensive in this area, although air defense is at a premium at the moment, and we are hearing that the United States is planning on providing a larger amount of air defense systems and munitions to help out with the situation that is ongoing in the area. However, the news is not all that great, as we have heard that Russian forces have supposedly reclaimed a part of Robotny here near the area of Novoprokopivka, or really along the Zaporizhia front line, as we have now started to hear that apparently a small advance is being made, and the Russians are planning on reclaiming a large part of what the Ukrainians took during the 2023 summer offensive, which didn't realize any of its objectives of capturing Tokmak or Melitopol, but nevertheless did show that the Russian southern front, or the Surovikin line, could be breached in specific areas. It appears that may be reversing at the moment. In the meantime, we've also heard from inside the Russian Federation that Russian exports of gas is drastically dropping to historical record lows of 712,000 tons of diesel and gasoline just last week, compared to the same week in 2023, compared to around 844,000 tons of diesel and gasoline products during that week last year. This is showing once again that Ukrainian oil refinery attacks inside of Russia are proving some very successful results, and are once again giving us an idea that the Russians are in a tight bind for gasolines, and for that reason they're completely stopping a large amount of exports so that way they can try and divert it and funnel it into the Russian military and industrial sectors, or the commercial sector, to try and keep the nation running. At the exact same time, we've also heard today that an official step forward has been made in the form of U.S. nuclear forces being stationed inside of the Republic of Poland. As an announcement came out today, the Polish government has officially made a request for the United States to move its nuclear weapons into Poland. I want to make this quite clear that they are not requesting that the United States give them nuclear weapons in their possession, meaning that from that point forward, Poland would have a nuclear arsenal of its own. What they are requesting is that United States armed forces are allowed to be able to move their nuclear weapons from inside of Germany and forwards into Poland. The reason why Poland wants this to happen is because of Russian nuclear escalation within the region, which happened almost a year ago, with Russian nuclear weapons being moved and stationed inside of Belarus, and also a high militarization of the Kaliningrad Oblast, where we have seen that hundreds of thousands of Russian service personnel, such as ground forces, air forces, and naval forces, have now begun to be stationed there, severely threatening the security of the Suwalki Gap, a part of Poland and also a vital part of NATO logistics, and not only that, threatening the Baltic states as well. If a conventional war was to begin and the Russians were immediately to be put on the back foot, it is expected that tactical nuclear weapons would be used rather quickly, most likely within the first few weeks of this war. Because of that, the Russians would have an upper hand advantage given the current nuclear playing field inside of Europe. With Russian tactical nuclear weapons being inside of Belarus, those aircraft could launch and drop their tactical nuclear weapons most likely within under an hour's window to any armed forces that would be in this area, and if they had started to move into Kaliningrad or into Belarus, that response time is greatly decreased, somewhere to around 45 to 30 minutes. At the moment, with U.S. nuclear forces stationed inside of Germany, most of these nuclear forces are actually stationed on the farther western side of Germany, in what would be called former West Germany. That means that these aircraft have to fly several hundred miles to the active front lines in this hypothetical war, and then drop their tactical nuclear bombs, meaning that in that kind of a situation, the United States is hours behind in an official response to a Russian tactical nuclear attack that would have occurred on a large army group within the area. This puts NATO forces at a severe disadvantage in the event of a major land war inside of Europe, and for that reason, the Polish have been greatly concerned in requesting the provision of these nuclear weapons, or at least the moving of these nuclear weapons into Poland, so that way, if the Russians ever did go into a conventional war, they would be a lot more scared to pull the small nuclear trigger instead of immediately pulling it because they would have such an upper hand advantage in response time compared to Western countries. Meanwhile, while all of this has been going on inside of Europe, we've also been getting some incredibly interesting and concerning news that the land war inside the Middle East may be expanding into farther and further countries, once again showing that tensions, while appearing to have decreased in the Middle East since the Israeli attack, the retaliatory strike that was conducted on Iran about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, it does seem as though it is entirely possible that the conflict may begin to escalate again. We did hear that the Iranians made a statement during the back and forth that happened 2 weeks ago in the form of major attacks conducted by Iran and Israel in turn, that if Israel did not conduct any more attacks on their terrorist-supported forces such as Hezbollah and Hamas, they would not try and conduct further strikes against Israel. It appears that Israel has decided to ignore these statements and really demands by the Iranians, as they are conducting their offensive operations into Rafah soon. That is once again being put back on the green light and back on the schedule, and we are also hearing something that is unprecedented in the modern day. The Israelis are suggesting, or making a statement, that if Hezbollah forces do not withdraw from southern Lebanon, they will invade the nation of Lebanon and occupy a large area in southern Lebanon to create a security buffer zone that will be controlled by the Israeli Defense Forces, meaning that Israeli forces will occupy Lebanon and really control large parts of it, or occupy large parts of it, until they believe that the Hezbollah threat has been dealt with, which means that this occupation, in theory, could possibly be an indefinite one. This comes at the exact same time that we do hear that apparently some forward preparations have been made by the Israelis, possibly the movement of armed forces into the area, and not only that, we have heard, although this isn't included as bullet points on our video report today, that there are still air raid sirens going off in northern Israel, as Hezbollah is continuing almost a never-ending barrage of rockets and drones into the area of northern Israel in an attempt to hit Israeli civilian sites and also military sites as well. It does appear that the situation in the region is starting to continue to spiral into a downward and more unstable direction, and it appears that the Israelis are going to be trying to face it with the result, well, with the responses that they believe will produce the best results. Whether an Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon would produce any kind of positive results in a decrease of Hezbollah activity or the destruction of Hezbollah forces within the region is largely unknown, as a large Israeli ground campaign into the Gaza Strip has largely proven to be somewhat unsuccessful in actually dealing with the Hamas fighters. While they have been able to contain Hamas fighters within the area of Gaza itself and now Han Yunis, it appears that it appears that Hamas fighters continue to just move further south into the Gaza Strip. That's why currently the Israelis are planning on an offensive operation into Rafah, because Hamas has moved into Rafah. That's really the last place they are, and they are still continuing to conduct attacks against Israeli defense forces and rarely against Israeli civilians within the southern area of Israel, near to the area of Ashkelon and Ashdod, and also as far east as the area of Beersheba. Going off of this, we don't really know how successful an Israeli ground operation would be in southern Lebanon, but it would most likely trigger another response by the Iranians, as this would be threatening directly and jeopardizing the existence of one of their largest direct action terrorist groups within the region, which is of course supported by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Nevertheless, we will be keeping an eye on this once again developing situation as best we can, reporting any breaking news as soon as it comes out, and at the exact same time, we will also be trying to keep y'all up to date on the Ukraine war conflict like we have been nearly every single day. I thank every single one of y'all so much for watching this news summary. If y'all enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really enjoy it, make sure to go down on the link in the description below and join our Patreon, because that helps out our channel massively in being able to support itself and also being able to make these kinds of videos a reality. I have to make a huge shout out to all of the patrons that we already have on there right now, because each and every one of y'all who are supporting this channel helps us to be able to keep this thing possible. And not only that, you also get a bunch of special features when you get on Patreon, largely getting to see a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes that we would want to post on the channel, but it would really clutter it if we do, so we go and put it on Patreon instead. But nevertheless, thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.